Питання закінчення війни і справедливого миру для України – це пріоритет. Ми провели нещодавно перший інаугураційний саміт миру. Я хочу подякувати за те, що Індія була присутня на цьому саміті. І сьогодні обов'язково однією з тем буде саме саміт миру, як ми можемо просуватися в цьому напрямку. Ми дуже очікуємо, що Індія зможе доєднатися до спільного комюніке інаугураційного саміту, і про це я буду говорити з прем'єр-міністром. Вчора, до речі, відбулася перша, а після саміту миру перша енергетична зустріч в онлайн-форматі. Ми дуже зацікавлені, щоб всі країни світу доєднались до рішення всіх криз, які принесла ця війна. І енергетична зустріч сама по собі – це вже великий прогрес. Далі у нас зустріч щодо продовольчої безпеки і гуманітарної. На сьогодні ми погодили з стороною наших сьогоднішніх гостей, з Індією, погодили 4 документи в цей історичний візит прем'єр-міністра Моді між Україною і Індією. Це медична сфера, це співпраця в аграрному напрямку, це гуманітарні відносини, це культура. І підготовлена спільна заява за змістом візиту прем'єр-міністра і щодо розбудови стратегічного партнерства між нашими країнами, торгівлі між нашими країнами та військово-технічна співпраця. Все це має зміцнюватись. Я дуже за це дякую. Радий вас бачити. Слава Україні!
एक्सेलेंसी, हम लंबे समय से एक बात सुनते आए हैं कि युद्ध की सबसे पहली कैजुअलिटी ट्रूथ होता है। लेकिन जब आज मैं उन बालकों की स्मृति में बनाए हुए म्यूजियम को आपके साथ जाकर के अपने श्रद्धा सुमन अर्पित कर रहा था।
Your Excellency, we've been talking about the war which has been going on for a long time, and the first casualty of the war is truth. Today, when I had an occasion to pay my respects to the children who had lost their lives, and I went to the memorial which was constructed in their memory along with you, my heart was filled with emotions, and my heart felt a great sense of grief. And the casualty of truth is because of the death of innocent children, and it's very painful. For any civilized world, for all those people who believe in humanitarian values, for all those people who are sensitive to humanitarian values, such incidents are totally unacceptable. In the whole world, for all those people who believe in humanitarian values, such incidents cannot be accepted.
कोई भी व्यक्ति इसको स्वीकार नहीं कर सकता है। एक्सेलेंसी, इस दर्दनाक परिस्थितियों के बीच भी
Your Excellency, despite those tragic circumstances, you welcomed my delegation and myself with such warmth. I convey my heartfelt gratitude to you for that.
मैं हृदय से आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। एक्सेलेंसी, आज का दिवस भारत और यूक्रेन के संबंधों के लिए एक बहुत
Your Excellency, today is a historic day in India-Ukraine relations. Today, for the very first time, an Indian Prime Minister is visiting the land of Ukraine. This on its own is a very historic event.
ये अपने आप में एक ऐतिहासिक घटना है। कल आपका नेशनल डे है। ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण दिवस है।
Tomorrow is your national day. It's a very important day, and on my own behalf and on behalf of the 1.4 billion people of India, I convey my very best wishes to you, and I hope and I pray for peace and prosperity of Ukraine.
और मैं कामना करता हूँ शांति के लिए, सुख और समृद्धि के लिए। एक्सेलेंसी, 2021 में ग्लासगो में मिले थे। और पहली
Excellency,
ही
in
मुलाकात में
2021, we had met for the first time in
गहरी
Glasgow.
मित्रता का
And
अनुभव
from the
करने
very first meeting with you, I felt a very
और तब
deep
आपने
sense of
मुझे
friendship with you. And you
यूक्रेन
very
आने के
respectfully
लिए
invited me to
बहुत ही
Ukraine.
आग्रह से निमंत्रण
And
किया
at that time, I could not even realize
मैं
that I would be
कल्पना नहीं
visiting
कर
Ukraine
सकता
under
हूँ
such circumstances.
कि मुझे ऐसी परिस्थिति में यूक्रेन आने की नौबत आएगी। एक्सेलेंसी, हमारे द्विपक्षीय संबंधों में
Your Excellency, despite the
ऐसी
difficult
विपरीत
circumstances,
कालखंड
our
में
bilateral
भी
relations are seeing good progress.
प्रगति
And I
हो
can
रही
say
है
that in such a tense environment,
और
progress in our bilateral relations between
मैं कह
India and
सकता हूँ
Ukraine
कि ऐसे
reflects the
तनावपूर्ण
maturity
वातावरण
of
में
our bilateral relations.
ये प्रगति हम दोनों देशों की मैच्योरिटी को प्रतिबिंबित करती है। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आज बड़े आदरपूर्वक मेरी उस भावना को व्यक्त करना चाहता हूं कि जब युद्ध के प्रारंभिक दिन थे,
Your Excellency,
भारत
being
के
in
हजारों
Kyiv
बच्चे
today, I respectfully convey my
यहाँ
very
शिक्षा के
warm
लिए आए थे,
feelings and
पढ़ने के लिए
emotions
आए
on one particular aspect. When
उस
this
युद्ध
war
के कारण
started,
फंसे हुए थे,
thousands of Indian children were stuck
उनको
in
बाहर निकालने
Ukraine
में
who had
आपने
come
जो
here to
मदद
study, and they were stuck in difficult
और जिस
situation.
संवेदनशीलता
And the
के
way you
साथ
supported them, the way you helped them,
हमारी
and
चिंताओं
in
को
such
आपने
great sensitivity, you
समझा
not only understood our concerns, but
और
made all efforts
सुलझाने
to
के लिए
address
भरसक
our
प्रयास
concerns.
किया।
So for that,
इसके
on
लिए
my own behalf, on behalf of
मेरी तरफ
1.4
से
billion people of India, and on behalf
मेरे
of
देश के
those
140
students who
करोड़
are stuck
नागरिकों
here
की तरफ
and their
से
families, I convey my heartfelt
और
gratitude to you.
उस संकट की घड़ी से निकल करके आए हुए उन बच्चों के, उनके परिवारजनों की तरफ से आपका आज मैं हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, आप भी भली बात जानते हैं और पूरा विश्व भी जानता है कि युद्ध के समय हमने दो प्रकार की भूमिकाओं का रास्ता अपनाया।
Your Excellency, you are well aware, and the entire world knows that regarding the war, India has had a twofold role in all of the situation, and we have tried to our best to fulfill our role. First is regarding from the humanitarian perspective. In the time of crisis, there are several types of requirements that the people of Ukraine needed, and to fulfill those requirements, we adopted a humanitarian point of view, and we tried our best to make those demands and requirements fulfilled. And I can assure you that in the future as well, going ahead from this humanitarian point of view, we will always stand with you, and you will find us two steps ahead.
भारत हमेशा हमेशा आपके साथ खड़ा रहेगा और दो कदम आगे चलेगा। एक्सेलेंसी, हमने जो दूसरा मार्ग चुना, वो दूसरा मार्ग है युद्ध से दूर रहने का।
Your Excellency, the second aspect of our role has been to stay away from the war. But it is with full conviction that we stayed away from the war, but it never meant that we were just an indifferent bystander. We never adopted that role. We were never neutral, and we had a side right from the first day. Our side was peace. Excellency, I come from the land of Buddha, and in my land there is no place for war. I come from the land of Mahatma Gandhi, who showed the path of peace to the entire world.
हम महात्मा गांधी की धरती से आते हैं, जिसने पूरे विश्व को शांति का संदेश दिया है। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आज जब यूक्रेन आया हूं तब मैं 140
Excellency, today when I've come to Ukraine, I have come with the feelings and sentiments of 1.4 billion people of India, and their sentiments are inspired by humanity. So coming to the land of Ukraine, I have come with the message of peace.
शांति का संदेश लेकर के आया।
Your Excellency, a few days ago, I hosted the third Voice of Global South Summit, in which 120 countries participated. So on behalf of those countries of Global South as well, I have come with the message of peace. Your Excellency, you well understand and are aware that as far as the peace is concerned, India has made its proactive contribution towards that. And you're also aware that our approach has been people-centric.
और मैं आपको भी और
And I
पूरे
want to
विश्व
tell you
समुदाय को
and the
विश्वास
entire
दिलाना
world,
चाहता
this is
हूं।
our conviction and our commitment,
भारत
and we
का
say it very
commitment है।
loudly and clearly.
और हम स्पष्ट मानते हैं
The message is that
कि
we
संप्रभुता
respect
और
we
क्षेत्रीय
support the
अखंडता
respect
का
for sovereignty and territorial
सम्मान
integrity. This is of
हमारे
utmost
लिए
priority to
सर्वोपरि
us.
है, हम उसका समर्थन करते हैं। कुछ समय पहले समरकंद में जब
2
राष्ट्रपति
years
पुतिन
ago
से मैं
in
मिला था,
Samarkand, when I
तब
had
मीडिया
met
के
President
सामने
Putin, I had
आंख
told
से
him, looking
आंख
into
मिला
his
करके
eye
मैंने
in
उनको
front of the
कहा था
media, that this is
कि
not
ये
the era
युद्ध
of
का
war.
समय नहीं है। मैं पिछले दिनों रशिया की मुलाकात के लिए गया था, वहां भी मैंने साफ साफ शब्दों में अपनी बात कही है कि किसी भी
And last month
समस्या
as
का
well, when I
समाधान
visited Russia to meet President
रणभूमि में
Putin, I
कभी
told
भी
him very
नहीं
clearly
होता है।
that problems cannot be resolved on the
समाधान का
battlefield.
रास्ता बातचीत से ही
The
निकलता
only
है,
way of resolving problems is through
डायलॉग से
dialogue
निकलता है,
and through diplomacy, and that without
डिप्लोमेसी
losing
से
any
निकलता
further
है।
time, we should move towards
और
that
हमने
direction.
बिना समय गंवाए उस दिशा में आगे बढ़ना चाहिए। दोनों पक्षों को साथ
Both sides will
मिलकर
have to sit together and to
इस
look for
संकट की घड़ी
ways
से
to
बाहर
come
निकलने
out of
के
this crisis.
रास्ते तलाशने होंगे। एक्सेलेंसी, आज हम जब रूबरू मिल रहे हैं तब
Your Excellency, today we are meeting
यूक्रेन
in
की
person,
धरती पर
and I have come to the
और
land
आप
of
जब
Ukraine, and I have just visited a
बच्चों की
memorial
शहादत को
dedicated to
उस
the
जगह को
children
देखकर
who were
आया
martyred in the war,
मेरा मन
and my
भरा
heart is
हुआ
filled
है,
with
तब
emotions and sentiments. So
मैं
today
आज
I
आपसे
would like to have an in-depth
शांति
discussion
की
with you
और आगे
on the
बढ़ने
way
के
forward
मार्ग पर
towards peaceful resolution.
विशेष रूप से चर्चा करना चाहूंगा। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाना चाहता हूं कि शांति के हर
Your
प्रयास
Excellency, I assure you that for all those
भारत
efforts being made
अपनी
towards
सक्रिय
peace,
भूमिका
India
निभाने
is
के लिए
ready to
तैयार
make
है।
its proactive contribution, and
व्यक्तिगत
I
रूप से
personally,
मैं भी
as a friend, if
अगर
there
इसमें
is
कोई
any
योगदान
role
कर
that I can
सकता
play,
हूं,
I would very much like to
मैं
play that role towards peaceful
जरूर
resolution.
करना चाहूंगा। एक मित्र के रूप में मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आज जब आया हूं, कल नेशनल डे,
Your Excellency, I have come on the
मैं
eve of your
चाहूंगा
National Day,
हम
and
सब
therefore I would like that
जल्दी
all
से
of us
जल्दी
work towards early
शांति की
restoration
सूरज
of
को उगता
peace,
हुआ देखें।
and India will be ready to make its
मेरी तरफ
proactive
से
contribution towards that
शांति के
objective.
हर
And
प्रयास
once again, I convey my heartfelt
सक्रिय
gratitude to
योगदान
you
की
for
भूमिका के
the warm
साथ
welcome extended to me.
आपके स्वागत सत्कार के लिए मैं हृदय से आपका बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
So there you have it. You know, both the leaders meeting, Prime Minister Modi with Zelensky, and a very warm and cordial kind of an exchange there, a kind of confidence building which was extremely clear by what both the leaders spoke. They spoke about, you know, peace when it comes to a war-torn region like Ukraine, and Prime Minister Modi particularly stressing on the fact that he's from the land of the Buddha and the Mahatma, that being Mahatma Gandhi, and how he is somebody who does not encourage any kind of war in any part of the world. And there you see both the leaders who, before they met, of course those are the visuals on your screens, and this is just before both of them sat down, and of course first they shall go inside for a photo op, and then there you have it, Zelensky and Prime Minister. What a historical visit indeed, first by any Indian's head, for any Indian Prime Minister to have gone to Ukraine. And this particular meeting is going to have, this is a strategic meeting, of course, and also several other decisions which will be taken, and we shall bring you up to speed on what really this comes, whether this comes to fruition or not. Meanwhile, Dr. Jaishankar is also speaking. Let's cut across, and then we shall bring more on this exchange between Zelensky and Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Such as respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty of states. As I said, they spoke about the summit on peace in Ukraine. The last meeting was in June of 2024. In terms of our own positions, I think I read out for you that particular paragraph. I would say, in addition to that, there are references in the joint statement to our bilateral cooperation, to trade, to commerce, to education. We signed 4 agreements today. One was in regard to community development projects in Ukraine. One was in regard to drug control standards and harmonization. One was on cultural exchange, and the fourth one was agriculture. Finally, let me just say that we have been, in the past been providing humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. I think 17 consignments so far have been delivered. These are largely in the medical, on the medical side. And today we handed over the Bhishma. Let me have a look at that. Where is that? These are cubes which contain medical support equipment, which are very effective, very compact, very deployable in many ways. So these cubes with a total weight of 22 tons were handed over today, along with 10 gensets. So I think this would probably be a fair summary of today's discussions. I'm sure you will have some questions or thoughts. I'd be happy to answer them.
We open the floor now, and please do introduce yourself before you ask the question. So let's start there. Rishikesh.
Hi sir, Rishikesh from Press Trust of India. So we have seen in the past that Ukraine side has made a very strong statement on the issue of India's import, especially on gas, energy or coal. So when today Prime Minister meets with President Zelensky, did President urge India to curb its imports from Russia?
Okay. Can I take a few, because I'd like to cover as many people as possible. So
Vishnu.
Sir, Vishnu Shok from NDTV. Were there any specific proposals made by us, by India, to Ukraine in terms of a possible immediate path towards ending the conflict?
So question is specific proposals and immediate path.
Specific
proposals and the adjectives in question are specific proposal and immediate path.
Yes, sir.
Right, got it.
You can take one more question.
Yeah, sure, I'll take 3.
The first question is, India didn't position itself as a negotiator between Ukraine and Russia. However, Bloomberg reports that your side is willing to deliver some message from Russian side to Ukraine. Was there any specific message today from Putin to Volodymyr Zelensky? And the second question, what is the stance of the India on Chinese peace plan? Because India respects Ukrainian territorial integrity, and it doesn't include it. It didn't include it in Chinese peace plan.
Can I go with these 3 answers?
Sure.
Okay. So the first question, did the issue of India's energy trade with Russia come up? Yes, it did. I wouldn't say at great length, but what we did was to explain to the Ukrainian side what was the energy market scenario. The fact that many energy producers are sanctioned, making the market potentially very tight, and why actually today there is a compulsion, in fact not just a compulsion, why it is in the interest of the international economy as a whole that oil prices remain reasonable and stable. On Vishnu, your question, in a way, they kind of feed into each other. Look, I would put it this way. Clearly, we've been having our own thinking and discussions with many other countries. Also, because the Prime Minister was recently in Moscow, there were detailed discussions there, which we have been quite public about. So he shared, I think, many of the thoughts and the substance of these discussions. I wouldn't necessarily characterize it in the way in which you said Bloomberg had described it. But in turn, I think we heard from President Zelensky at some length what his own views were, about these issues, but what his own views were about the subject as a whole. I mean, not necessarily to anything which we may have told him, we may have heard in Moscow. So it was a very back and forth discussion. To my mind, there was certainly, I'm sure that there was information which we, obtained here, and I'm sure we also perhaps may have brought up points or flagged issues which may or may not have been people would have been cognizant of here. The way we ended was that at the end of the discussion, I think there was a sense that this is a very complex issue. I mean, yes, certainly we have this one particular format, the peace in Ukraine format. But as I said, it is the view not just of India, but certainly of India as well, that there are, there could be multiple ways of approaching this issue. Now, you asked me for one of those examples, and I'm not comparing here. I'm just responding to your particular question. Regarding, whatever China may have proposed, I think it's not for us to respond. I think it is for the parties concerned to respond. So I would suggest you direct that question at the Ukrainian government.
Can we have a question here? Rishabh, please.
Minister, good afternoon. Rishabh from Times Now. Sir, you spoke about Ukrainians asking us to be part of the Ukraine Peace Summit that last happened in Switzerland. Has there been any proposal from Ukraine to India to try and convince Russia to be on that table? Because Russia last time was not part of the Peace Summit in Switzerland. So has there been any talks from Ukrainian side that India should try and get Russia also on the table?
Siddhant.
Sir, Siddhant from Vienna. Did the Ukrainian side briefed on the Kursk incursion? Sir, this side. Yeah. Did the Ukrainian side briefed on the Kursk incursion? And my second question is, PM paid his homage tributes to the victims, the children who died in the war. The Prime Minister also mentioned this to President Putin 2 months ago in Moscow. So what was the message in terms of Prime Minister paying his homage to the children?
Please.
Thank you for the question. Minister Nick Beak from BBC News. You talked about Prime Minister Modi's visit to Moscow last month, and a lot of people here were very upset to see that embrace between the two leaders. Also, they were quite upset to see India overtake China in terms of the biggest importer of Russian crude oil. And also they say they're disappointed that there hasn't been an explicit condemnation of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So in light of that, I'm just wondering whether you had difficulty today persuading President Zelensky that India is not favouring Russia, but is indeed pursuing a policy of non-alignment. And secondly, because of that meeting in Russia last month, I think Prime Minister Modi is probably the most significant, influential world leader to have spoken to both sides recently. What personal role could he play in some sort of pursuit of peace? Thank you.
Yours was the first question. In terms of the Peace in Ukraine Summit, it was discussed at some length because much of what President Zelensky said revolved around, not everything, but a significant part of it. Now, where they go, at the end of the day, it's their initiative. Okay, it is their initiative in which we have taken part. I mean, if you look at it from at every stage of that initiative, when it started in Copenhagen, his predecessor was there. Then the NSA went into Jeddah. The deputy NSA went to Riyadh and to Davos. Similarly, the hybrid formats in Doha, even at Bergenstock, we have been represented at that level. So we have been represented there, but we also agree on some parts of it and don't agree necessarily on all of it. So I think there was a very open discussion on this. Now, what will be the next steps? Who exactly will come? Will the Russians come in, not come in? You know, that's really not an issue for us to take a call. I mean, that's an issue which presumably the government of Ukraine is dealing with. Siddhant, regarding your issue on Kursk, yes, well, I would say the military situation, including some recent developments, did come up for discussions. And in terms of the visit, you know, what you asked about the homage, particularly to the children. Look, you know, in any conflict, obviously, any death is something which is, to put it mildly, regrettable. And if it is a civilian death, a humanitarian death, even more so. And if it is a child's death, even more so. So I think it is something which touches everybody. And even, you know, when we were in Moscow, it is a subject on which the Prime Minister spoke publicly. So I think it was very natural for him to come and express that feeling in some kind of gesture. Regarding your question, you know, in our part of the world, when people meet people, they are given to embracing each other. It may not be part of your culture, but I assure you it's part of ours. So, in fact, today I think I saw the Prime Minister also embrace President Zelensky, and I've seen him do it with a number of other leaders in a number of other places. So I think perhaps we have a slightly cultural a gap here in terms of what these courtesies mean. In terms of you know, what you asked about the oil issue, look, you know, India is a big oil consumer. It's a big oil importer because we don't have oil. Now, it's not like there's a political strategy to buy oil. There is an oil strategy to buy oil. There's a market strategy to buy oil. So the figures of where we get our oil imports go up and down. It depends on the state of the market. But it would definitely, I think the fact that the market is tight, that today big suppliers like Iran and Venezuela, who used to supply India, are constrained from operating freely in the markets, I think is a factor which needs to be taken into account. Regarding you know, the conversation between the Prime Minister and President Zelensky, I think it was a perfectly convivial conversation. I think it was very constructive. I think there was a lot that we said which he heard with a great deal of attention. He knows that we mean well by Ukraine. He knows that, you know, we are today you know, very, very keen that this conflict should come to an end. And essentially what the message from our side to him, which, you know, which surely would have not come as a surprise to him, is that, you know, if there is anything that we can do in any way, you know, in sort of upfront or behind or supporting somebody, you know, it's the objective that we are interested in rather than the process. We are willing to do whatever we can because we do think that the continuation of this conflict is terrible for, obviously, for Ukraine itself and for the world as well.
We can take only two more.
Yes, sure.
Quickly. Uma Shankar.
विदेश मंत्री जी, आपने बताया कि 32 साल बाद राजनयन रिश्ते के बाद प्रधानमंत्री पहली बार यहाँ पे भारत के आए। क्या रेसिप्रोकल बेसिस पे एक इनविटेशन राष्ट्रपति जेलेंस्की को भी दिया गया है, और अगर दिया गया है तो उनकी तरफ से क्या इस पे रिस्पॉन्स रहा?
Can I have a question here? Last.
Thank you. The peace formula proposed by the Ukrainian president has already mentioned today, and I want to ask you how interested is India in participating in the implementation of this formula, and if yes, which of the 10 points of this formula would India be ready to support? And I have one more question. I want to ask you, what is India's position on the application of international sanctions against Russia, and under what conditions India would join a broad sanctions regime or some part of it? Thank you.
Just wanted to join the last question, if you don't mind, because
I think you're being a bit unfair. There's somebody behind you who hasn't asked a question. With that, please.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Ashok from ANI. I have a question that Prime Minister Modi's visit to Ukraine has sent us positive sign to the world, including India. Will this is the favorable time for the Indian students to return Ukraine for their study?
Okay. Who was the first question? Yamashankar. हाँ, आपका सवाल जो था, I'll do it in both Hindi and English. देखिए, ऐसा था कि पहली बार भारत के प्रधानमंत्री 1992 के बाद यूक्रेन आए हैं, तो ये अपने आप में इसका महत्व होता है। तो जैसे ऐसे समय में ये भी स्वाभाविक है कि प्रधानमंत्री जो हैं वो अपने होस्ट को, प्रेसिडेंट ज़ेलेंस्की को निमंत्रण देते हैं। इस बार उन्होंने दिया था, तो हमारी अपेक्षा है कि उनके सुविधा के अनुसार राष्ट्रपति ज़ेलेंस्की जो है भारत में उनका विजिट भी होगा। So essentially what I said was that Prime Minister was here for the first time after 1992. It is natural on such occasions that he extends an invitation, which he did in this case. So we expect that at some point, as per his convenience, President Zelensky will visit India. On the second question, the peace formula. Look, we've been involved and with the multiple meetings of the summit, starting from Copenhagen, as I said, at a very senior level. How to take it forward? I think there is a diversity of views. I mean, there is a diversity of views, not just involving India. I think many other countries who have also taken part in this summit have their particular views on how to take it forward. Now, what we heard from the Ukrainian side today was their view and, their expectation on how to go forward, which, is understandable. But I think in terms of our view is that any exercise, if it has to be productive, will naturally have to involve the other party concerned. I mean, it cannot be obviously, a completely one-sided or a one effort which would fructify. Regarding sanctions issue, I would say, look, generally, in India we do not impose sanctions on any country. It's not part of our political diplomatic history. If at all there are sanctions, I mean, we generally look at UN sanctions. Those are the sanctions that we respect. In terms of the last question, students, look, at the peak there were more than 20,000 students here. Obviously, 2022, many of them went back. Some have come back. They come back because, there are various academic compulsions on them. My understanding is that there are roughly somewhere between 2,000 to 2,500 students. Am I correct? Currently. What I mean, at this time, if you're asking us what advisory would we give them, we would still urge caution because, you can see there is a conflict on. I mean, it depends again on the place, on the city. But our hope again is that, this conflict will come to an end, life will return to normal, and that we will see the full return of Indian students in due course.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the close of this session. Thank you very much for your presence. Sir.
All right, so we heard Dr. Jaishankar answering questions and also laying out the plan that India has going forward, not only with Ukraine, but also Russia and China. In the studio with me is my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul, and let's decode this for the viewers. Aditya, historic visit, first time ever by a head of state from India. What do you make of this historic visit?
Well, one simple and crisp answer, Sudha, is that this is how Indian foreign policy is shaping. It is more confident, it is more vibrant, and it is standing its ground. Last month, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Moscow. He embraced, Putin, and the world was watching very closely what will happen. And within days, within 6 weeks, we have this crucial meeting for the first time, an Indian Prime Minister entering the Ukrainian territory. That too on a Rail Force One, a 10-hour journey, a statement in itself, really, and then actually marking a tribute to the children who have been killed, and also at the Ukrainian National Museum, paying tribute to the Mahatma Gandhi. And in fact, Prime Minister in his initial introductory remarks speaking about how he is from land of Buddha and he is from the land, our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, who talked about peace, who did not only talk about peace, but actually meant it in letter and spirit and made it possible. India was given freedom through that entire movement. So he spoke about that peace, and whatever our foreign policy has been over the last 2.5 years, which talks about this is not an era of war, solutions cannot be found in a battlefield, that is certainly being reflected today in this 6.5 hour visit of the Indian Prime Minister and the External Affairs Minister Jaishankar to Ukraine. So a statement in itself. In fact, I saw a BBC reporter asking Jaishankar about that embrace that did not go well with the Western countries, and Jaishankar was as tough as he always is, showing a mirror to the West, saying that this may not be a part of your culture, but this is very much part of our culture. We embrace, and that's how it is going to be. Right. So I think this is a new reality. It's a new international order in which India is significantly, diplomatically and otherwise playing a very crucial and important role. Right. India cannot be ignored, and the meetings that took place today and the statements that have come out from Kyiv in Ukraine are testament to the fact that Indian foreign policy is at a fast pace growing, and certainly the West, Russia or any other country cannot ignore it.
Right, but what about, the balance, as it were, Aditya Raj Kaul, considering that, you can put a Western prism onto it, but then the balance to be created between Russia and Ukraine, and let's not forget that there is also a Trump. I mean, the elections are on the anvil. How does it impact, the geopolitics of that particular region? Because a lot of foreign policy watchers are saying that it's going to have a lot of repercussions in case Trump wins, and therefore the kind of fallout that will have for India. You said, Aditya, that it's a Western prism, it's a Western lens that we are putting to it. Because I saw both of them, and it seems to be, diplomacy is a very strategic game. You play the game, but there I saw that the game was overtaken by warmth. Would you concede?
Well, diplomacy is certainly a long game. It's not instant noodles. But what really happens here is that India, for the first time over the last few years, has proven and in fact did walk the talk on the fact that to us strategic autonomy is very important. We are not going to succumb under pressure. We are not going to listen to the lectures on democracy or how our diplomacy has to be actually taken forward by the West. West may have their own concept, they can apply that in their own sovereign territories, but India is not going to work through one axis or the other. When a war is underway, India is not going to join one camp against the other. In the last 2 years, Jaishankar in New Delhi and in several European countries has shown this mirror to the West that on fuel purchase, on energy supplies, on imports from Russia, we are going to do that because that is what our concerns are, our priorities are. When we talk about our national priority, that will be counted first, just like America does, for its own people and its sovereign constitutional rights and other issues. So India has shown to the world that India will not look the other way. Our own national priorities, our own concerns will be the top priorities for us, and that's how our foreign policy will be shaped. India will not join a Russia camp or the Ukraine camp. The one camp that India will join is the camp of peace, and that's what Prime Minister Narendra Modi also narrated, saying that we have not been neutral. Calling us neutral is wrong. In the war, of course, we have a side, and that side is of peace.
You know, Aditya, can we say then that it's almost like harking back to Pandit Nehru's time of Panchashila, where you said that I'm not going to, during the Cold War, side up with the two superpowers which were there at the time, that is the US and as well as Russia. So pretty much that is something that we have followed, that thread in foreign policy, saying that we're not saying this side or that, we're just saying no war and only peace, Aditya Rajkal.
Absolutely. You know, I always say this whenever I speak about the current stance taken by the government of India, that for years together, for decades together, India has had a policy of non-alignment. Only now we are seeing this in a much more vibrant manner. We are seeing this in a much more strategic calculation manner. So as of now, you know, the West desperately wants India on their side. The West desperately wants India to keep a check on China as well, and that's what we are talking about. We have seen developments in Bangladesh, we have seen developments in Ukraine, in the Middle East as well. So West somehow thinks that, you know, pressure tactics or manipulation or arm twisting will help, but that is certainly not going to help. I'll give you a recent example, Sudha, of how over the last 2 years there have been concerns of Khalistani terrorism and Khalistani radicalization, particularly from UK, US and more so from Canada. And India has been urging, there have been 26 requests that have been sent for extradition of several terrorists, including Nijjar, who is now killed, Pannu and several others. But the West has not cooperated with India. West's, you know, idea of radicalization and terrorism is very different when it comes, when they are victims and when Indians or any other foreign, are victims. So in this case, there's been an interesting development in the last 24 hours. China, in fact, from Hong Kong, has extradited a terrorist who had escaped from a prison in Punjab's Patiala in 2016. And that's a big message, certainly, when the West does not want to cooperate with India, when the West does not see Khalistani as an imminent threat on Canadian soil or the American soil. At the same time, the Chinese are trying to walk the talk and, in fact, help India, even if it's a small criminal, a small Khalistani or a gangster who has been handed over yesterday to the Punjab police. So I think increasingly now, as India is emerging as a leader of the global South, the West, particularly the US, Canada, UK, will have to now reimagine things in this new international order when India is increasingly important and playing a very pivotal role for global peace, negotiations and diplomacy.
You know, Aditya, I also want to ask you that, you know, there has to be nation building. It's a war-torn region, Ukraine. Therefore, there are going to be efforts which are, you know, which are supposed to be made there. But the point is that we were also very dependent on Ukraine for, I mean, if you look at defense, for instance, if you look at medical and, the pharma field as well. So do you think that with this meeting, all those embargoes, and I'm using that word as not in the geopolitical sense, but embargoes will be lifted now, and those things will, because India started looking for, alternatives because of the war in Ukraine?
Well, of course, any country, you know, would look for alternatives at a time when there's a war ravaging and the imports and exports are, increasingly difficult, as well as its connectivity. In fact, through the initial months of the war, you would remember, Sudha, that Ukraine, in fact, is the biggest grain producer in the entire world. It produces more wheat than anybody else in the entire world, and that's how that wheat is, in fact, taken by Indians and several other countries all across. So I think, of course, we are at a time when this is now led to a long war, where at this particular moment, at this juncture, there's a fatigue. there's an exhaustion. And both Russia and Ukraine somehow are looking for a way out. They both want a respectable exit. And that's where India can play an increasingly important role when the world is entirely divided between Ukraine and Russia. India certainly wants peace. India wants both on the negotiating table, and perhaps bring in some kind of a consensus so that the war could be ended. There could be no further bloodshed, no civilians and innocents could further die in this mindless war, because nobody is certainly benefiting from this territorial aggression that we have seen over the last 2.5 years. We've seen a lot of innocents dying, unfortunately. But in the next few months, the main focus certainly would be how to end this war, which has continued for months and months on. Perhaps some kind of a respectable exit, as both countries now, in a certain way, have been, aggressors, have each other's land. Will there be some kind of an amicable settlement? Perhaps in the next few months we could see that.
Also I want to just take you away from the diplomatic and geopolitical thing. I saw today, it may sound exaggerated, but Zelensky almost looking at Modi like an elder statesman, as somebody he can look up to. I know that several people in our own country tomorrow are going to say, oh, that was a very tight hug, we did not require it. Why did Modi put an arm around him in a very avuncular fashion, and that seems like very, patronizing, etc., etc. But there is one thing that I have seen, that his warmth, which it kind of permeates Aditya Rajkol. Would you agree?
Well, of course, this is a message in itself. Just like the West wasn't happy with the embrace between Putin and Modi, today Russians and perhaps the Chinese and their allies would be watching very, very closely, Iranians as well, as to what is exactly happening right now in Ukraine. The hand over the shoulders of Zelensky, the way they paid tributes, at the Ukrainian National Museum, and the kind of conversation that was, in fact, a deep conversation that was happening. In fact, Jaishankar, India's External Affairs Minister, in the press conference mentioned that a large chunk of the conversation that happened in the last 3 hours was more about the war, how it could be concluded, and how there could be a peaceful settlement. I still feel a lot that was discussed hasn't really come out yet. Perhaps there would be some backroom diplomacy and negotiation that will happen. How things will unfold over the next few weeks would be interesting to watch. India already stated as a leader of the global south, playing a very pivotal and important role. It's not just the Ukrainian President Zelensky. We have had Polish leader Donald Tusk and several others speaking about how India can play that important role. Both the Russians, the Ukrainians and the Western many countries see India as that hope, as that glimmer of hope that can lead these negotiations for peace, and hopefully we'll see more of it in the next few days.
And on that note, thank you very much, Aditya Rajkol, for joining us on this broadcast. And it's a wrap. We shall bring you all the latest on the Zelensky-Modi meeting and also the press conference which happened. Thank you so much for watching.